Okay, so this is day 4 of our pasuk of Mishlei 22:15. Ivelis kshura b'lev na'ar shevet musar yarchikenu mimenu. So plain shot, foolishness is tied to the heart of a youth. The staff of discipline will distance him from it. Okay, so today I mentioned that we're going to tackle the Malbim. Okay, and just to remind you of where I stand on the Malbim. Okay, so going back to our tier rankings. So remember, these are tier rankings not in terms of the quality of the Mefarshim, but in terms of my usage of the Mefarshim, right? So quick review. I'm not going to explain all of them because that was a whole shiur. Meiri is the go-to commentary for everything you can possibly want is in the Meiri. And like if you're going to use one commentary in your life, then it's going to be the Meiri. Ben Yonah, Targum Sadigon, Mitzvahs David are my go-tos. Rabag, the Pirush of Sadigon and Radak are often good, but are lacking in some ways. Rabag, because he sometimes takes it out of the subject matter of how we typically learn Mishlei, which is the decision making. Sadigon, because a lot of his Pirushim are just referencing you to instance in Tanakh, and you have to kind of work out the ideas on your own, which just makes it difficult to use. And then Radak is excellent, but his commentary only goes up through we only have up through the first 21 chapters of Mishlei, so it's not on everything. So it's a lot, but it's not everything. Okay, then in C, this is where we get into like the inconsistent realm, okay? In terms of like my ability to use it. The reason why the Malbim is here, and this is the subtle part, the Malbim is there not because his ideas are lacking. His ideas are consistently good, but since the Meiri has such rigid ideas about Hebrew, and according to him, there are no synonyms. Sorry, Malbim, what did I say? Oh, sorry. Yeah, Malbim has such rigid ideas about Hebrew, and he holds there are no synonyms, and every single word has an exact definition that only he can give you. Then he's not good at developing derech for learning Mishlei, even though he is good at giving you ideas. So especially in Mishlei, when there's a Mishlei jargon, he has his whole what do you call it? His whole like theory about each of the terms. And again, so do I, but like I'm not at the point where I'm convinced that my terms are correct. Like he is at the point where he's convinced. And unless you subscribe to his terms, you can't like get those ideas on your own. You could hear ideas from him. And then the D ranking has to do, the D ranking has to do with the fact that I'll just make this big again. So it's mostly my lack of experience. So the Rav Hirsch and the Chomas Anach and Ibn Yafia, I'm just not, sorry, I'm just not experienced. Sorry, that's insufficient data. Sorry. D, I'm just not in their world. And the reason why the Gra is there is because he, like Rashi, holds that this is a lot more about Torah and mitzvos. Mishlei is a lot more about Torah and mitzvos than everyday decision making. So and also the Gra is not in my physical Mishlei. It's a separate book. And so when I'm learning Mishlei, I just don't tend to have it on hand, and it's not on a lot of Torah. So I just don't see it that much. Okay. So, but I will consult him every once in a while. So today I want to focus on the Malbim and then supplement him with the Gra. Okay. In fact, we're going to start with the Gra. Okay. Because I think we can get the Gra on his own, and then in light of the Malbim, maybe you got another idea. So very short commentary here, okay? And this one is a typical Mishlei commentary in terms of not bringing it into Torah as much as he usually does. Ivelis kshur b'lev na'ar, foolishness is tied in the heart of the youth. Kolomar, meaning to say, shehagadol, that the adult, which again, I don't know if this is an adult in years or an adult in maturity, development, whatever, the adult, af shiase ivelis b'libo, even though he does foolishness in his heart or with his heart, Yodea shehu ivelis. He knows that it's foolishness. Ve'enu kashur ba, and he's not tied to it. Aval hana'ar ha'ivelis kshura belibo. But the youth, foolishness is tied to his heart. Afal pichein shevet musar yarchikena. Nevertheless, the staff or the rod of discipline will distance him from it. To the point where it's far from his eyes to do it.
To do
the foolishness, to act in accordance with the foolishness. Yeah.
Oh, whoa.
What?
Isn't that very different?
The last part?
That's saying this is a good thing to do shiur.
Yes, this is a good thing. Yeah, he's taking the approach that this is a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah, which I guess you're right. We haven't really wait, have we taken any? Yeah, we took the Radak Oh, sorry, the Rabag yesterday was also saying it was a good thing, right? The staff of the guiding staff, right? Like the shepherd.
Oh.
Yeah, right. But he is taking the side that this is a good thing. So the thing that caught my eye here was that first part about what it means for it to be tied to his heart. So he's saying, I'm not saying the idea, but just to get the facts here. So he's saying that there's a difference between, so you have two people who both are engaged in foolish behavior, okay, or foolish whatever. One person knows that it's foolishness, and the other person does not realize that it's foolishness, okay? And he's saying that because he doesn't realize it's foolishness, because the youth doesn't realize it's foolishness, then the staff of Musar can distance him from it in his eyes. Whereas the gadol, and it's weird. I mean, I'm going to ask this, even though I think I know what the answer is. Who's is he saying it better off or worse off, the gadol or the na'ar?
One seems to be self-sufficient, the other one seems to need help.
Right. So in the one sense, the na'ar is worse off because he's dependent on someone else to point this out. Okay, but yeah.
But he's not rejecting the truth. The person who sees foolishness and decides to still pursue it.
Yeah. Right. The person who sees it and still is doing it, that seems like a lower level, right? That's like the mazid, not b'shogeg, right? So, and the implication of the pasuk is that if you're learning that Sheva Musar Yarchikenu Mimenu and it's focusing on the na'ar and it's saying because it's kasher belibo, it sounds like he's saying that this is not going to help the gadol. The gadol is too far gone. Right, that he if he sees that it's foolish and he's still doing it anyway, then this technique at least is not going to work with him. I'm not saying that no technique works, but this technique is not going to work. So, So what can we say on this? What more can we say on this? I think it's just like a nice simple read of the pasuk, but let's see if we can get an idea out of it. And I also am intrigued by this thing. The Sheva Musar would distance him from it, and I feel like our interpretations didn't really focus on rachok. I think we just learned it as like we'll separate him from it, but he says rachok as like rachok be'inav lasosa, to the point where it is distant in his eyes to do it. Kind of reminds me of what we've been saying in Rambam Bekius, which is the Rambam has 3 steps in what we typically call like aziva sachet or kabbalah asid. So he says yazav achotechato, the sinner should abandon the sin. Machshavah and remove it from his plans, and resolve in his heart not to do it again. And the way we explain that is means you like physically stop doing the sin, right? So if you're smoking, put out the cigarette. If you are living with a woman in sin, like kick her out, break up with her, right? If you are holding on to someone else's property, like return it. Yesirin Machshavah, the way I explained it, based on a half-remembered Pesach idea, was everyone has certain actions in their repertoire. These are the types of things that David Lichter does. These are the types of things that David Lichter doesn't do, right? David gives daily ideas to people. He bird watches. He doesn't shoplift. He doesn't like beat up old ladies, right? So if you have an action that is in the category of things that are in your drop-down menu of like actions that you do, you remove it from that category. And then the third step is accepting upon yourself not to do it again. It sounds like he's talking about like in that second category that it's not that we're even guaranteeing he's not going to do it again, but you're basically taking this as being something that like he is actively doing and being like, it's now going to be like improbable that he does this. It's far in his eyes to do it. Like it would take some crazy set of circumstances for him to do it again. So that's like a more subtle interpretation of Yarchi Kena than what we had. But the question is like, how does that work? He's also not really explaining what the Sheva Musar is, which means that we don't necessarily have to like take a stance on that, but maybe we can infer a stance on that from what he's saying.
What did we do yesterday?
We did the Sadi Gaon, who had the idea that after Sadi Gaon we did the Rabag. The Rabag is the one who said, let's refresh our memories here.
Or we were talking about both of them, that they were, it was Sadi Gaon.
Yeah.
That a person's nature is towards the good, and that
was Sadi Gaon.
Okay.
Yeah, because Rambam was the one who said that the youth's nature is impulsivity.
Okay, so
which we reconciled, but Sadiq is one you're thinking of.
I don't know if this fully ties into that.
Yeah.
But the guiding scepter, which is kind of how I see this in terms of how the grow is going.
Mm.
So that just seems to be showing him the proper path, right? You're not necessarily interacting with the tide thing.
Yeah.
Right. And this also might go into, I think why I was thinking this was based on your presentation of teaching, right? So you're just showing like clearly illuminating a proper path to go, and then the kid follows it. And at a certain point, they're just following it by rote, right? Yeah. But at a certain point, these knots tighten on their own. That's like the natural development of the person, that the foolishness leaves them. And then because he's on the right path, so then he can start seeing, oh, this is the right path, and now I understand why, beyond just being clouded by foolishness. So, but if a person's not on the right path, right, and then they start off foolish, then the wrong path is going to corrupt them when the foolishness unties from them, such that they can't, even if they realize that something's unfoolish, they've habituated themselves towards.
I see. Okay, right. So you're also diagnosing the Gödel's problem, which is that let me just articulate the move that is counterintuitive but correct here. I think the way that we're naturally inclined, that we were thinking of this, is the foolishness being tied to the heart is a bad thing, and the foolishness not being tied to the heart is a good thing. Like the goal is to untie it. Certainly in the way we took it in our approach, that's the way we had it. But what you're saying, and I think what the Gra is saying, is that the foolishness tied in the youth, in the heart of the youth, is an advantageous state because it can be untied, right? But with the Gödel, it's not tied, but he's like fully internalized it, right? Like, right. We touched on that on day one, I think. But
and what I'm saying is that the knots naturally loosen.
Yeah.
And so if you're in a environment where that naturally loosening is going to then habituate good actions and good habits, then that's going to be good for you. But the person who's on a bad path or hasn't had a good path illuminated for them, then even though they start realizing that their endeavors are fruitless and that engaging in all these habit or whatever is really not satisfying them, they've become so engrossed in those types of actions that it's very hard for them to leave them, even with the recognition of its foolishness. Okay,
so I'm gonna just make sure I understand this. So are you getting the notion that that it will naturally resolve itself or untie itself? Are you getting that from the Gra, or you're getting that from?
No, I'm adding it in.
Yeah.
Because if the person recognizes that something's foolish and is still engaging in it, then there's got to be some draw on it from him. And somehow this scepter, which seems to be more like a guidepost or an illumination, doesn't seem like it's actively the thing, but it's more like when a shepherd, he's not using the staff necessarily on the thing, but it's more of a guide to. So you're just guiding the child.
Right. The shepherd doesn't hit the sheep with a staff.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So you're just guiding the child while he's ignorant.
Yeah.
So that you set him up for a good life. And then once I just find that as you grow older, you understand things more and different causes and whether things are actually fulfilling or not. Like that just naturally comes just through experience.
Yeah.
What this child is lacking is, and maybe this is a stance on what this foolishness is, life experience. Right. When you don't have life experience, you're very foolish in your actions. And the more you develop life experience, the less foolish you are about the reality of the way in which the world works. But sometimes people, even though they recognize through their life actions that the world works a certain way, they become so engrossed in certain habits that they can recognize it's bad for them and still be engaged.
Right. So I see, I feel like what I'm about to say is going to agree with you, but I'm not sure if like we're interpreting the pasuk differently, because what I was going to say is the Gra puts the emphasis on the behavior, right? And then the second side, so I feel like what's going to happen is if the youth is not made aware of the fact that he's engaging life through a foolish way of thinking about things, so then the behavior will I'm going to say this even though I'm realizing there's a problem with it. That perspective will harden, and he will not be able to escape the behavior because he's only seeing, like, I'll give an example. Like, let's say like he thinks that the only way to get ahead in life is to cheat and steal, right? So the correct thing is to guide him and help him to realize that that's going to end up making things worse and that there are other ways to get ahead. If left to his own devices with that foolish behavior, because it's the easiest behavior to do, so then eventually he's going to become attached to that, and it's going to become part of like his worldview. But I realize that's not what the Gra is saying, because the Gra is saying that when he grows up and he's a gadol, he realizes it's foolish. Yeah.
Which is why I'm saying the foolishness is naturally untying.
Yeah.
The danger is that before it unties, that you're going to be set up on a wrong path.
So you're saying that the gadol is going to recognize that it's wrong, but is kind of helpless slave of his habits to be able to do anything about it. Right.
He knows that it's wrong.
Right.
And his life experience has confirmed him that it's wrong, but he's just so engrossed and he hasn't set up any other options. Kind of like the Gemara we did last year, right? That if a father doesn't teach his son a craft, so then he teaches him thievery. Right. So if you don't give the proper tools to a person while they're young and foolish, then even when they're older and not foolish, they're just not going to have the proper tools. And so they're going to feel trapped in a certain lifestyle, even if they know that's the wrong lifestyle.
I mean, they're just doing the best they can with the tools they have. They don't have the right tools.
What is the kashor then that the Gra says, the middle of second line? Because I know what you're saying, that is in a way tied to him, even though it sounds like you're saying that this gadol knows that it's wrong and he's doing it.
The foolishness isn't tied to him. The habituation is still. Right? He knows that it's a wrong action.
Okay.
The other thing also, by the way, is it sounds like the Gra is using iveles as action. Because he keeps on using the word sheyase iveles, but then he says yase iveles belibo. That's the part I'm not exactly sure how to read. Whereas we were learning iveles, as we're not in the packet, we're on the thingy. Whereas we were using iveles more like a mentality. Let me just fill you in. So the Vilna Gaon, the same pasuk as yesterday, is saying that an adult does, even though he's doing foolishness, he knows that it's foolish and it's not tied in him. But the youth, the foolishness is tied in him, meaning that he can't recognize that it's foolishness. And that's why you can help him, because you help him to recognize that what he's doing is foolish, and then it'll make it less likely for him to do it. And that's what we're trying to figure out, like how that works and like what the implications are.
It seems that the distinction he's making is that when he grows older, he's still doing foolishness in his heart, meaning his desire, I'm translating heart more as desire. His desires is still towards foolishness, but he knows that his desires are towards foolishness. Versus the child who just has desires and hasn't had the life experience of knowing whether or not these desires are foolish or not, doesn't know whether or not they're foolish.
It's funny, you are taking, or you explaining the Gra, are taking the opposite stance on that Socrates or the Plato Aristotle question that we had before, because we're saying that it is possible to know that something is bad and to do it anyway. Before we were saying that if you're doing it anyway, that means that indicates like a lack of knowledge in the thing. He does seem to be saying that you can know that.
A person who, I'm not sure that this fully goes against the Socrates, meaning a person can know conceptually that is foolish, but not have internalized it. I'm not sure what side that goes on.
So let's just get out let's translate this into practical terms and then see if we can state the main idea clearer. All right, so who is this? So this is definitely for the disciplinarian also, right? Because the youth is
for the educator.
For the educator, I guess educator here, not disciplinarian, because he's not using shevet as a punishment thing, right? So this is for the guide, the shepherd, and
Okay, tying into another thing which we said about like Rabbi Shir in terms of children, right? Don't view them as like an adult that's a little adult making decisions, right? They make a bad decision. It's not because they're it's because their foolishness is high within them. They don't recognize the foolishness of this decision. And don't think that like just keep pushing them and showing them the right way to go, and they'll follow you. And don't be concerned about necessarily them like they take a toy from another kid one time. That doesn't mean that they're going to be a thief. So just be a role model.
Yeah.
And they'll follow you.
Yeah.
And then they'll understand that at a certain point, they'll develop an understanding of why you're doing the actions that you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And they'll see that those actions are good and they'll continue in them.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. The conclusion feels very similar to what we said for the Rambam yesterday, which is that the main role has to be to just provide them with the perspective that they can't have right now.
Yeah.
In order, you're basically like giving them secondhand experience.
Yeah.
And
until they can develop their
right.
own firsthand experience.
Right. Yeah. And so with the gadol, you're going to have to take a different approach because he sees that this is foolish, right? But he's too tied into it.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I know this pasuk is not giving advice on what to do with the gadol. Yeah. Okay, good. I think it's good for now. Let's put this on the back burner and then do the Malbim, which I mentioned is a very different approach, but I do think that they're related. Okay, so Malbim, in order to understand the Malbim, we have to understand his terminology. Okay, so Malbim's commentary is structured with the same like as David Metzudas Dion. He has a biur hamilos where he defines the terms and a biur ha'inyan where he defines the idea. Okay, so in his explanation of the words, he says, Ivelas, kvar hisbar Ivelas hi hasafik. So Ivelas is doubt. She is subak b'chol davar chachma, where a person doubts any matter of chachma. Okay, so if you go back to the very beginning, what?
Any matter?
Any matter, but here's I'm going to try to do something.
I mean, he's just like a skeptic of knowledge.
Okay, so here's the thing. So I'm going to do something which might be an illegitimate move, which is I'm going to take half of the Malbim's terminology and ignore half of it. Okay, so I'm going to take just because our pasuk only uses the words ivelis and musar. I'm going to just focus on those two. But his definition of ivelis does incorporate chachma, and I'm going to kind of ignore his definition of chachma. Okay, so let me show you in early Mishlei, in the first real pasuk in Mishlei, Yiras Hashem Reishis Das, Chachma and Musar Evilim Bazu. Fear of Hashem is the beginning of knowledge. Chachma and Musar, the Evilim despise. Okay, the fools despise. So here's his definition. Oops. Here's his definition of Evil there. Okay, he gives a nice long definition. Okay, so he says like this. This is just more expanded. Evilim. Evil nigzar mimilas ulai. So he learns that the word Evil is derived from the same word ulai, maybe. Okay. Shemore al hasape, which indicates doubt. Okay, so these are doubters. V'hem ha'anashim hamatilim spekos al kol davar. These are people who instill doubt into everything, or who cast doubt into everything. V'i efshar lahem lekabel chukei hachachma, and it's impossible for them to accept principles of chachma. Shematilim safek ba'mitasim, because they just will doubt them. Okay, V'ha'ivilim enam pisayim. Evilim are not simpletons, right? This is the big obstacle that people have when they first learn Mishlei, because they see the word fool and they think that means low IQ. Not necessarily the case. He says, Kinimsa philosophim gedolim. You'll find huge philosophers, great philosophers, shayim musupakim b'chol davar chachma, who doubt everything. Skeptiker, right? I don't know what language the Malbim spoke. I think it was Russian, if I want to say it. I don't know, but okay. Visbar inyanim b'chol hasefer. And we're going to expound on them in the entire book. Okay, so Evilim are skeptics, and if you just read the definition of Evil, it would sound like he's saying like they doubt everything. And again, they could be very intelligent. He's saying they could be great philosophers. Now, I just want to, so that I'm not being totally intellectually dishonest, I do want to show you what his definition of chachma is and why I can't make heads or tails of it. Okay, so he says like this, long definition of chachma. So I follow him for the first part. Chachma, kol hamatur b'shem chachma tzarich tiyena ba'oso ha'inyan shnei drachim hafuchim zeh mizeh nimtzayim b'mitzius kayam. So he says, in order for something to be chachma, there have to be two options that are opposites in existence. Va'az yitur haderech ha'echad mehen b'torah chachma, v'derech ha'hafuch lo yitur b'torah sichlus. Then you could call one chachma and one foolishness. Okay, so chachma is a term with an opposite. Okay, you'll see we're in the contrast right now. But if there's only one way to go, and there is no other way to go in reality, but then it's under the category. So if there's only one way to go, then there is no opposite. There is then it would be in the category of understanding, knowledge, and intelligence. Okay, or rationality. So for example, there's no word, people use this term, people incorrectly use the term false knowledge. there's no such thing as false knowledge. Either something is knowledge or it's not knowledge. There's no false knowledge. And something like, there's not even a word for like, that's the opposite of bina, like in terms of something, according to the way he's saying it. Aval, the inyan sheish bo shnei drachim hu kamo anava. Now this is where I lose him. The inyan sheish bo shnei drachim hu kamo anava v'ga'ava. So what is an example of something where there are two paths? Humility and arrogance. Emes v'sheker, truth and falsehood. Ahava v'sina, love and hate. Nedivus v'kilos, generosity and stinginess. Ha'achila v'hatzom, eating and fasting. Zima v'aprecious, promiscuity and abstinence. Ha'kedusha v'hatuma. Never seen those as opposites. Okay, kedusha and tuma. V'chol kiyot b'zeh. Now, this is the part where I really lose him. V'ein koach ha'adam lachkok chukei ha'chachma midato. No person can establish principles of chachma from his own mind, v'sichla ubinasa, and his own intelligence and understanding. It's impossible for any created being to clarify through proofs which of the two paths is chachma and which one is foolishness. Therefore, you cannot arrive at any of the ways of chachma with certainty by way of proof, except from Hashem. That's why God is the one who establishes the principles of chachma and teaches them to people. I don't get that. I feel like you can make arguments that humility is wise and arrogance is foolish, or that MS is like wise and sheker is foolish. I don't know what he means that the only source of this is Hashem. Yeah.
I think we spoke about this, something similar to this last week,
either
here or in healing last week.
Yeah.
People that are like philosophizing, but if they have like emotional pulls toward a certain direction, then they're going to believe that what they're thinking is true and correct, but it's really being spurred on by something that's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
In which case, then still maybe not this like extreme opposite.
Yeah.
Like one does seem pretty obvious. Maybe in more nuanced ways, then it won't be as clear, and then in that way they'll need this from Hashem to be telling us what.
Okay, that could be. I think a more probable route is the focusing on the word chuke, like laws or principles of chachma that you can't work out. I think he actually says this explicitly in a second. Let me do that. I guess I'll finish that. I didn't intend to read this whole thing, but because we're not going to use it, I don't think. Therefore, the only way you can know the ways of chachma based on his definition of chachma is through nevuah. You can know some of it through observation and natural understanding. But the ones that are known through nevuah are the words of Torah B'Ksav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Shechukosehem umishpatehem umitzvosehem mispashtim al klal hadrachim v'haminhagim hein bepeulos hagvia k'mo ha'malchos v'hamashkim v'habeilos v'hanegios v'hadiburim v'hakinyanim hein b'midos nefesh k'mo harachmim v'hachanina v'hanediyos v'ha'ava v'sina v'ha'anava v'kiyotza hein b'deos. So he says the Torah is going to give you these laws. Okay, I'm saying l'chukim are like laws, detailed laws about that regulate your body and your midos that are in matters of chachma. And then he says, "Ve'ein kates l'divrei hachachma." There's no end to the matters of chachma. Ki pratem uprate pratem lo hachilim hasfarim u'megillos. You can't write down all the details in Sfarim and Megillos. Bavur shedarchei hachachma lo yivadu la'adam misichlo, because you can't know these through your own mind. So it sounds like he's saying like detailed. You can't like legislate chachma. But again, I feel like I'm just missing a fundamental concept. So here's what I want to do. Let's go back to our pasuk, read his interpretation of our pasuk with his definition of ivelas. Oh, I didn't read musar. And his definition of musar, let's just look at musar really quickly. It says, musar, shorasho yasar. So he says the shorosh of musar is yasar, umishtatif impol asar. Okay, so yasar literally means to afflict, and asar means to restrain. Right, like asur or like beis ha'asurim, like a prison, is a restraint. Rak shezeh ba'al ma'asar haguf, but asar has to do with restraint of the body. Upoel yasar ba'al ma'asar hanefesh, but yasar is about restraint of the soul. Okay, so this is why like I like translating Musar as discipline, because it's like self-regulation, but it could also be imposed from outside, but it's about the soul, not about the body. And the word Musar refers to anything that binds the soul to not go outside of its boundaries. Whether it's Musar from Hashem when he brings afflictions to prevent a person from going onto the bad path or from deviating from the good path. It's also used by Tochacha. He says, I'll explain the differences later. And by people, we use the word from Musar that's given from an older person to a younger person, who is compelled to listen to his voice. And in this book, it's about Yiras Hashem. And here it's about Yiras Hashem, which prevents the soul from going, which binds the soul to the Darkei Chachma. Okay, so let's try to learn our pasuk with his definition of Ula, of Evilim, Ivelis being skepticism, and Musar being that which disciplines the soul. Okay, and let's conveniently ignore his definition of Chachma. So here's what he says in our pasuk. Ivelis is doubts that a person casts upon the ways of Chachma, and he objects to them. Omer, this is saying Shehagam Kshitiye Ha'ivelas Etel Hagadol B'Shanim Yase Shorish B'Ma'amake Levavo, that in an adult, this type of skepticism takes deep root in his heart, is deeply rooted in his heart. And it is impossible to separate him from it. K'mosh Kasav, as it says, Evil Yinat Musar Avi, an Evil, which I guess he's learning as an adult skeptic, despises the discipline of his father. And then there's another pasuk, "Im tichtosh es ha'evil." If you crush an evil with a mortar, you will not get the foolishness out of him. Okay, so like you can't get it out no matter what. Aval believe na'ar, but in the heart of a youth, adayin lo matzah ha'ivelas shorish b'ma'amaki levavo bifnim. The skepticism has not yet found taken root in the depths of his inner heart. Rather, he kashura believe it's just tied to his heart. I should say mind here probably, right? Because I think skepticism is a matter of the mind. It's just tied to his mind. Kikosher davar al davar, like when you tie one thing to another, through a string or a cord. Kosher osam, yasur hakesher. If you break the string that binds them, then the knot will be removed. It's funny, he doesn't use the mashal of untying. He uses the mashal of like cutting the cord. Kain ha'ivelis hu etzlo davar chitzoni. So too, the foolishness to the youth is something external, rak kashurbo, but it's tied to him. Va'idei shevet musar yarchikenu mimeno. But through the shevet musar, it will distance him from it. So he does not explain at all what the shevet musar is. Okay, but it's a very vivid description of like the problem we're dealing with, right? Mm-hmm. So to summarize, skepticism takes two different forms. In the gadol, skepticism is deeply rooted, and you can't get it out no matter what. But in the youth, it's just tied. And just like something that's tied is not in the thing, it's on the thing. And it's attached, but you can cut it and release it. So too the skepticism, I keep saying foolishness, the skepticism in the youth's mind can be cut and released. So the question is like, what's the idea there?
And how are you cutting?
And how are you cutting and releasing? He doesn't give us any guidelines here. Yeah. There. So just in the interest of time, I'm not going to say the idea, but I just want to say what I was thinking with the connection to the Gra is that it is interesting that like, actually, no, it's not like the Gra. It's the opposite of the Gra. Well, whatever, I'll just say the idea that I don't know if you've encountered this in your dealings with youth and philosophy, okay, but I think there are certain minds that are plagued by skepticism, which they think is rationality. Okay, in other words, it is correct to ask questions on things and to not accept things blindly. Okay, but it becomes a disease when you just reject anything that you can't prove firsthand with your own mind. Right.
100%.
That's the problem. And again, this is the the Isser of Lo Sasuru Achar Levavchem Achar Einechem, according to the Rambam, which is that we do have Ikarim, and that some of the Ikarim can be proved externally, like God's existence. Other Ikarim we only know through Nevuah, like Schar V'Onesh and Mashiach, right? But what both of them have in common is that unless you are a trained philosopher, then you should accept those Ikarim, again, based on Torah Misinai, which you can prove with your mind, but you accept those Ikarim because not all minds are capable of discerning the truth on their own. And the guy who insists, I'm not going to accept anything unless it is proven to me 100%, like what's going to happen is, since he's not intellectually developed, maybe he's not on the level to be able to grasp the truth. Maybe there are emotional forces which are biasing his mind. Maybe there's certain training and logic that he can't have. Maybe he's attached to certain behaviors that are screwing with his ability to assess things clearly. And he's demanding that everything meet the standard of his mind right now, and that's like a big mistake. He's setting himself up as the golden standard for everything, so that's unhealthy skepticism. And certainly the reactive skepticism where you just like, well, how do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know that? That's like not even responding to, that's not even how you engage in thinking. Like there's certain Seder and thinking. Like I remember Pesach saying once that if you want to learn geometry, and you immediately start off by saying I refuse to accept the idea that there are shapes unless you prove it to me, then you're not going to learn geometry. You're just going to stop it from the get-go. You have to actually there's certain whether they're actual axioms or axioms of the discipline, you need to accept those, learn the thing, and then you can go back and examine the premises later, So I feel like what happens is that the youth who is prone to that kind of unhealthy skepticism, there is a way to distance him from that. And I don't know what that way is yet, but once it takes hold and you've internalized this Cartesian thing, I'm not going to prove anything unless I'm not going to accept anything unless I can prove it to my mind. You just can't get past that anymore. There are going to be certain things that are just closed off to you, and it's going to put you on a derech where you're not going to be able to develop. Mm-hmm. That's not an idea. That's just my direction of my thinking right now. Yeah. You look like you had something earlier. When I asked about if you've encountered youth like this that have this.
Yeah. For me, the bigger point is there's some people who want absolute certainty in things.
Right.
When even just saying that this is a more rational conclusion for them.
Right.
Time, you get them to progress in things. And then also, I think in line with what you're saying, a person who is not even getting off the ground and can't accept certain premises just for the time being, then can't go through the process of seeing how premises interact with each other, and develop critical thinking skills, and then they're kind of
correct.
Stuck in their thinking.
I'll give you a nice little threefold division. So this I got from Mortimer Adler. This is how, when I give over Torah Misinai, this is how I started off, because people make the mistake of calling it a proof of Torah Misinai. So Adler uses the analogy of the American court system, which I'm not using this in rigid terms. But he's saying there are three standards of of proof. There's beyond the shadow of a doubt, beyond a reasonable doubt, and by a preponderance of evidence. Okay, so beyond the shadow of a doubt means it is literally impossible to doubt it. Okay, so the only types of truths that are beyond the shadow of a doubt are what we call first principles. Okay, or things that are strictly in line with the laws of logic. So, for example, the notion that a part is smaller than the whole. You can't think the opposite of that. That's built into the mind. However the ideas get in there, you can't think of, or the law of non-contradiction. Right? You just can't think the opposite of that, So that's the only things that are beyond the shadow of a doubt exist in the realm of math and like concepts that are innate in the human mind. Beyond a reasonable doubt is what you're saying, where basically you can you can come up with a reason to doubt it. Maybe it's all aliens, maybe we're all dreaming. I can't disprove that. But unless you have maybe this is all hallucination. Well, unless you took some sort of hallucinogenic, drug or whatever, you don't have a reason to think that you're hallucinating right now. By preponderance of evidence just means that given the two options, one carries more weight than the other. or given the arguments, or I mean, there's different ways to say that. But the point being that like to demand beyond the shadow of a doubt for everything, that's just not the nature of knowledge. That's not how knowledge works. And someone who demands that of everything is not going to be able to develop, and they're going to reject everything. And they're also not going to be consistent because, again, the person who says maybe we're all hallucinating still looks both ways before he crosses the street, right? So what he really actually believes is that there are real cars that could actually hit him if he doesn't like take precautions. He doesn't actually believe that like that the chances are equal that he's hallucinating or that this is reality, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so we should stop now, but this is just something to think about from the Malbim, and I thought it was an interesting thing because he takes it completely differently than the way we took it, but it's not helpful that he doesn't define Shevet Musar. Yeah, okay, all right, that was a fun 4-day thing. I'm gonna stop the recording right now and just tantalize you with something. So